This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio. Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. Joan and Janet are subtle energy empaths who navigate consciousness. Their passion is to support you in your evolution. As consciousness, we are all one. One mind, one heart, free of all limitations. Experience this reality with us and discover how it can make a difference in your daily living. Join us in a state of grace as we explore, with warmth and humor, this thing we call life. Now, here are Joan Newcomb and Janet Barrett.
Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. We're your co-hosts, Joan Newcomb, coming to you from Tacoma, Washington, and my partner, Janet Barrett's coming to you from Portland, Oregon.
Good morning, everyone. How nice to be with you again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have an interesting show today. Today we are talking about consciousness and movement. And in consciousness, there is no direction. Our senses perceive movement. So nothing is truly stagnant. It's just a change in speed and velocity. So stay tuned to discover a new way of playing as consciousness with these dynamics.
And here's an invitation to go deeper with us, to connect with us beyond the show. You can join us at our website, www.consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com. And there you're going to find out all kinds of good things for both Joan and I, where you can listen to podcasts of this show and all our other shows that are there, and things like our blogs and meetups and sessions. And Joan's going to tell you all that good stuff about that.
Well, you told them half of that, but for those of you who don't listen, yes, so you can hear all our shows. Our podcasts are listed there, and the blogs that Janet and I write are there. We also have meetups. Janet does fabulous meetups in the comfort of her lovely home in Portland on Tuesday nights and Thursday afternoons. I am less scheduled. I do meetups around the Puget Sound. I do them in Seattle, Bellevue, Tacoma, University Place. Let me see, the ones I have coming up. Actually, this weekend I have an expo in Kent. It's the Boeing Expo, Saturday, July 22nd from 10 to 4. I have a booth there. It's at the Kent Commons, which is 525 4th Avenue, Kent. So come on down and see me. I am going to be doing consciousness sessions there, $3 a minute, I think it is. And come on down. It's a rare opportunity to get those kind of sessions from me. I don't do them in other places. The next meetup I'm doing is Conscious Conversations in Tacoma. That's at the Wheelock Library in the Proctor District. And that is on Saturday, July the 29th. And at 3:30 to 5:30 in the meeting room in the back. So those ones are pretty well attended, and it's a great space and great group of people that come, and it will transform your life. And then the other one coming up that Monday right after that is Monday night, July the 31st at 6:30. I'm going to be doing Conscious Conversations in University Place, not to be confused with the University District in Seattle. It's University Place in south of Tacoma next to Whole Foods, and that's at the University Place Library. So that is coming up on the 31st. But we have something for those of you who are not local, who do not know how to beam yourself to the physical locations of Portland or Seattle yet. We have a way for you to connect with us beyond the show.
Our free conference call we do once a month, the third Thursday of the month. It will be this Thursday, and at 7 p.m. Pacific, and I think that's 10 p.m. Eastern. And and we take time. We take an hour. And we make an hour to just be with one another, look at the things that are challenging us in our lives, and give us our sense of support and warmth and non-judgment and what grace is. We provide that for an hour for each other. And it's just wonderful. Sometimes a lot of humor, sometimes a lot of angst, sometimes just life. It's always life. So if you are someplace and not local to either of us, please consider joining us, and you can find out about that at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com for that contact information. And then we're on Facebook and we're on Twitter and all kinds of ways you can get a hold of us. So please consider doing that off separate from the radio show. So we've got an interesting energy going on here, Joan. Definitely. And our subject about momentum and movement and energy and where we all seem to find ourselves. This will be interesting what we get into today. Yeah. You can feel it. Everything's kind of slowed down. That's
a good question and that's a good observation. I mean, it's a very interesting energy right now. And as you said that, this feeling of things being slowed down, sometimes it's like the motion of the archer where they're pulling the arrow back. So you have this feeling like this like inertia or even like this going backwards, retrograde motion. And you're about to be propelled forward. So that is what I feel like, I feel like we're all collectively taking a nice summer mini break, but we're in the process of about to being propelled forward. Yeah. And that actually brings up something I wanted to get out of the way before we drop into heart space.
Oh, yeah, about your group. Yeah, your space. You got your opening, your 12 weeks for transformation.
Oh, no, I was actually going to let that go since you hadn't. You glossed over it, but since you mentioned it, and then before we go to break, I also have something about motion and consciousness. But okay, so 12 weeks to transformation. Yes, I do have an opening. I have private coaching sessions. It's a high-end program. It's 12 weeks long. I hold the space for your transformation. It's a very powerful experience. It is a combination of my private coaching with you and also training in these techniques to navigate consciousness with a sense of mastery in the world. I only accept a few people per year, which is why it's like, well, doesn't she mention this every week? And it's like, yeah, well, I'm pretty picky about who I sign up. So I'm really just talking to you, the person there whose ears pricked up at this information, and it's like, yeah, this is a fit for me. So I would encourage you to go to my website, joan-newcomb.com, and look at my coaching programs and to get more information about it. And I'd love to talk to you about making changes in every aspect of your life.
Well, and that's so fits into our subject about being propelled forward, about working with the movement. And, the truth of it is we all resonate to different things, different people. And so when Joan mentions your ears perk up and you're the person, neither Joan and I are after everybody. We're here to help those who realize that there's a connection between any of us.
And I would jump in and say that if they're listening, they're one of those people.
Exactly.
You wouldn't randomly or consciously or deliberately come across this show if you weren't sparked in that. So, but doesn't mean that everybody who's listening to the show is a candidate for the private coaching program. But so that aside, what I was saying about consciousness and this movement. So, on one level of perception, we are constantly moving forward, and our focus is on spiritual growth and expanding and sort of moving up the evolutionary scale and, getting better than we were before. And if you look at all of that is a very physical level perception of movement. And consciousness exists outside of time and space. So the greater aspect of yourself that is consciousness exists outside of this kind of movement, this sense of movement. And what I'm finding within that in movement is that in consciousness there's also no direction. Right. So when I tune into my energy, or when I, for instance, I have a new technique now, which has to do with centering in the hologram, is that I have to let go every single time. I have to let go of the expectation of where the center of the hologram is because it's not a sense of motion, movement, or direction in the way you would think. And I keep thinking of references to, like, you know, when you're in the space station and there is no gravity, in order to move about the cabin, you've got to do almost like the opposite to propel yourself. It's a whole different orientation to how to navigate in that level of weightlessness. And I suspect that's what's sort of going on in all of our experiences as we expand in our awareness's consciousness, that there's just a different way of moving in the world.
Well, I think what you're describing is, you use the word that we are finding ourselves propelling forward or going forward, and that's what we want to. And also what's part of that is the passive position, where it's not about moving forward. That's only one way we're defining it, but that we're in that all directional. There's no direction, so there's all directions available. And that's the other energy of just being. And so you are moving forward and you're not moving forward. So let's go to break and we'll get into it.
Right. No, I'm going to go to break. I just wanted to interject. Is that passive position where you close your eyes and think of England?
No.
Okay.
So it's the egg. The passivity
of
the egg.
Okay. That's a deeper question.
Egg. Yeah.
Hold those images in your mind, folks, because we have to stop for a commercial break, but stay tuned because we're talking about consciousness and movement in a state of grace.
Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath, accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye. Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, along here with Janet, and we are talking about consciousness and movement.
And things are moving around. This will be fun today. All right. Well, let's see. How about we all know we're in heart space. It's just how much awareness we hold of it. But let's just remind all our listeners that is the place in space, and that's what consciousness is all about. So let's just take a few moments to remind ourselves that we are there. And so just notice your heart and appreciative. Thanks for having it beat. And there's movement for you. That heart is beating. That is movement. And just notice that. And then the emotional train. And our emotions move us. And notice that. So just notice what you have maybe up and running. You have more than one. What it'd be like to just, all right, I've got them. This is what they feel like. Let's feel something else too. Just not be attached. That's a movement. As you relinquish position, that's a movement. Your attachment. There we go. Notice how quiet it gets. And then allow yourself to move your awareness into the collective, where you and I are one, where we are just photons of light and biomass, frequencies and vibrations, all movements in the infinite sea of potential, which is no thing. It is just this deep, expansive, everywhere, no time, no space, no direction. And just notice how you feel that. How you might feel the sense of you that seems to soften a little bit. So just allow yourself to have this experience. And that's you as yourself, but you as consciousness. There's the movement. There we go. And there's a lot of energy out in the world. And as we become more aware of it, we hear the different rhythms, we feel the different rhythms, we feel the speed and velocity and the elements that make up life in new ways, in unfolding ways. We just want to notice and not be attached. Just allow for that to be present. There we go. Now there's a shortness of breath. So just relax. Let your heart expand. And you might have a sense of a physical heart expansion. And just allow for it to radiate out. And that's a movement. See, it's all about movement. In many different ways, in many different forms. Something here, something there, and something in between. And as consciousness, we're all of it. I think we're in a time of recalibration, which is movement. And in the stillness, there's movement. All right, Miss Joan, what you got there?
I was noticing stillness in the movement.
Yeah. Or movement in the stillness, huh?
Well, and I was aware of movement that happens on so many different levels. So
Yeah.
even if you appear to be comatose, there's movement going on.
Oh, there is. Yeah, certainly.
And actually, I keep coming back to the original message that we went to break on for me, which is about being aware of movement in a different way as we are expanding in consciousness. As greater consciousness comes into form, we are perceiving a different experience of movement. So, for instance, you know how that there's this delightful weightlessness or gravity, this kind of woo kind of feeling where, people will even fall over at your meetups, they'll flop onto the couch kind of experience. And that to me is there's more and more people saying they have vertigo, and it's like, no, that's not vertigo. That is perceiving from this greater experience, this sort of 5D coming into 3D. And so it's allowing yourself to not resist all these new sensations. Just notice what's different.
Well, I feel, sometimes there can be a sense of maybe overwhelm or like too much. And I think that's just indicating how you've set yourself small. And that's just telling you where you think you are and how you think that is different from the reality of yourself as consciousness, because there are no limits in consciousness. And as we're unfolding and opening into this awareness more and more, those rigid, hard-stuck things that define the self are just feeling. They have their feeling that this is all I can handle, and when it's not. And you just want to just keep opening. So anytime you're having a sense of overwhelm, which is movement that seems to be uncontrollable and you're swept away or something, is really just your signal to relax. It's your signal to allow. Consciousness holds for all. Humans allow. That's the mind and its limits. So, but consciousness allows for all. So there is this place that we navigate between that idea of self and our reality as consciousness. And those sometimes are two different realities, and they're not. It's all one reality that just shifts. And that's the movement, that's the dance. Yeah, there we go.
So this reminds me of like the calm before the storm.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
We're experiencing it be very quiet right now, but really it's like there's the calm before the storm going on.
Well, and I was thinking earlier, I was referring to it, was it maybe like a dead calm? A sailboat needs wind or it doesn't go anywhere. And the dead calm is when there's no apparent wind on the surface of the water. There is so much movement going on under that boat, and the boat itself is moving, but the wind isn't present enough to create a shift. And I think maybe some people, we have to admit that we like our drama. It keeps things exciting. It keeps us alive. It keeps us active, right? We were talking about that group last night, and, it's like, yeah, you're just shifting your orientation, I think, which is another movement when you shift.
Well, that reminds me of a description of huge growth and change that I've used for people, because sometimes it feels like you wake up in the morning and someone took your boat overnight and plopped it into a different ocean in a different hemisphere. And there is no wind and there's no current. So you're in this kind of dead calm, this complete kind of inertia, and there's no way to navigate because the stars are different. And I feel this when a huge change is going on and it feels like there's no motion. It feels disorienting because all your previous clues on how to do this are gone. But you're really in the process of transitioning to a new state of being. So I kind of sort of wonder if that's what's going on collectively right now that we're tuning into.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not up on all the details of what dead calm means to a sailor, but what you just described was the current is always there, and you can, if you go with the current, or I guess it seems like there is no current, there's just no movement, which that doesn't reconcile for me at all. but you're just going in a way that you're not controlling, and that it's not where you want to go. And so here's this current, and you're getting moved, and so you want to be able to have wind so that the good sailor knows how to navigate to go where he wants to go, not where the current takes him. And we do this all the time. Sometimes we want to go where the current is taking us, and sometimes we want to go somewhere else. Huh, interesting. Whoa, I got a lot of head pressure. Maybe that's the fight. Maybe people are fighting against the current. Yes,
or resistance. I mean, you bring up a very good point about resisting, and that's the body physical survival level fighting against the transition, because we like the familiar, we like staying stuck, we like and so dead calm, if you think about it, to a sailor back when they were reliant on sailing around the world, if you got stuck in a dead calm, it could mean death. You could be running out of fresh water, you could be running out of food. Right. So calm was not a good thing.
And you didn't know what was ahead, right? Or you know that it isn't what you want. And that's yeah, definitely. I wonder how many people do hold inside themselves this sense that I have to do something and it's not what I want. And that's what's kind of coming up to the surface, is because they're feeling forces at play that feel like the government or their family or whatever it is, something that says, well, you're coming along whether you want to or not. And it's really this chance of unfolding instead. It's not, we're holding it in the old reference, and it's actually a new reference place.
Well, and you bring up a very important point, because what part of you is resisting and what part of you is initiating? Mm-hmm. I find when we're in alignment with ourselves as consciousness, so when our body and emotional and spirit, or whatever you want to say, when we're all lined up with the greater aspect of ourselves, we're in total agreement with what is happening. Mm-hmm. We can see that it's all for the good. Mm-hmm. So, but if we're not in alignment, if we're not in agreement, if we're not in communication, then we're going to resist and fight tooth and nail and have it be really uncomfortable.
Well, and there's nothing like the joy and exhilaration and the testing that one finds for oneself when one is working with the wind against the wind, right? So there's that, what that feels like to be equal to, and you're doing this dance and you're doing this tacking and all this kind of thing. And for some reason, sailing just keeps coming to mind. Different than a motorboat. I don't really gravitate towards motorboats at all. It's a whole different experience to me. And that's where, to me, you're going where you want no matter what. If I sail, I have to work with the environment to get where I want. And that, to me, more is consciousness and human interaction that I would rather hold. There's lots of people like motorboats, and I got nothing against them. And that's a different kind of play. So, interesting. All right. Oh, well, I think we've covered that metaphor pretty good. What else we got?
Well, what else have we got? Metaphors, beating a dead horse. No, that's a different kind of metaphor.
Movement still, but okay.
Movement. We're talking about movements, right? We're talking about movement, motion, and detecting different kinds of motion. So bringing it back up to experiencing this as consciousness and how to navigate through this life from this greater awareness that's coming in to all of us. Because that's the people who are tuning into the show are on the leading edge already. They're already tuned into this, whether or not this is the first time you turned on the show and you have no idea what we're talking about. The greater aspect of you is right tuned into that, and you're hearing this on a specific level. Mm-hmm. And so I'm inviting you to notice and be different with the energy of movement in the world today in how you are navigating. You can navigate differently. You can, standing still is still, there's motion. You know, in our old paradigm, in the personal growth movement and spiritual growth is that you always had to be moving forward or you were stuck. And stuck was a terrible thing. Mm-hmm. But when you actually look at physics, nothing is ever stuck. Nothing is ever completely static. There's always movement happening. If you look in nature, you might look at the ground in winter where it's frozen over and there's nothing happening, but there's seeds are germinating underneath the surface.
It's just it's at a different pace. It's at a different place. That's all.
Yeah. So, it's different place, different pace, different dimension. The energy coming into form, manifestation happening on an unseen level. And, that's why, I feel like we're just on the verge of something really monumental, something really big is moving in, and people aren't even aware that they're in labor yet. They think it's Braxton Hicks. They just feel like there's a quickening, and they don't realize that the baby is coming out.
Well, and there's definitely, for those that track equinoxes and, all the cosmic influences that are going on, and there's stuff always going on. See, there's stuff always going on in the heavens. You can't say there's no stillness in the heavens. It's just moving at a speed that you can't track or you can't relate to, or, we have all these rhythms in us, the circadian rhythm and all the different things that do, everything has rhythm to it, And so it's our awareness of how something we can't see can affect us, and it moves us, and we either are moving with it and so we don't notice it if you're moving with it. You notice it if you're moving in resistance, and resistance just being out of step with it. It doesn't have to be resistance can come up in the form of you're just out of alignment with it, and you're in a different alignment to it as opposed to the matching alignment. And because you can't judge any of this stuff. So as soon as you go to do that, you're in trouble. And so in just acknowledging that there are things around us working at different paces and speed and velocity and relating is really helpful for you to get back to a sense of center in all of this shift or whatever state you find yourself. You and I, Joan, focus on how to help people become their truth, right? And acknowledge themselves as consciousness and what the difference that makes in their life. And we want to support people in understanding and appreciating their own unique ability to experience information. And all this is just information and how we relate to it. And what those perceptual biases that we operate out of and how they keep us in certain states of awareness and out of awareness. I think we really have a lot of states of awareness that we operate out of that we hold unaware. So, interesting where that went. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about perceptual biases, and we have, so it's interesting because we don't have just conceptual biases. We have, what did you just say?
Perceptual.
That's it. It was like, right. Our
sounds sort of like, did I just say that?
Sounds like it was a different kind of bias, and it was like, yes, you're right. So, my original training was clairvoyant, so I always see things in terms of pictures, and I always frame it in terms of, reframing your picture or whatever. And I forget that our physical bodies, besides being picture galleries of conceptions, of perceptions, is that, our bodies like a certain amount of stability. Even if there's a part of you that has a lot of air signs and you like being buoyant, you want the earth to stay still beneath your feet. And what this transformation is inviting you is to experience it in a different way, to have sea legs, going back to our sailing, is that it's really, we're all needing sea legs in order to stay balanced on increasing shift that's happening.
Yeah, there's that place in you that is navigating from an unconscious. You don't have to think about it. Your body is just keep correcting itself. And we only use the term correcting because this is not about good or bad or ugly. This is about the ability to monitor and go with the flow that the body is finding itself.
Right.
With.
It's correcting almost in the sense of like course correction.
Yes.
And
definitely.
you know how we are constantly doing these minute changes just to stay driving straight on the road, to, navigate down the sidewalk. I tell you, my walk-in in the morning, people would think I'm drunk because I'm all over the sidewalk, but I'm having fun with energy while I'm doing it, which is why I walk really super early in the morning. But, changing our, releasing our biases. I guess that's what that is.
Oh, yeah. Whoa, that's huge. That's what we do all the time. That's why, it's sometimes hard to track where you are, because that self-defining mechanism sometimes, it's always on board. It's always at center, but we lose our awareness of it. And so, I find so often happens with people in doing this kind of work, and since information is instantaneous and change can happen in a moment, and et cetera, and people have a hard time with their mind. The mind does not work as fast as everything else has shifted. And so people are still thinking, why am I here? Why did I fall over? Because there is a lag time in between where reality is. Reality is a different day, and it can shift that quickly. It shifts quicker. The mind works so fast. I mean, I'm not saying the mind works slow at all. It's just so dynamic. But the thought, the thinking that's attached in that energetic pattern is just a minute. This feels a little too solid. And so that has to loosen up and soften. And now it's gone. And I don't even remember what we were doing. And, everything just passes through. So movement can be quite an interesting experience. And when you're used to thinking in certain ways and certain patterns that generate certain behaviors, and all of a sudden, or slowly to your awareness, now it changed, but it's slowly coming in through your processor, which is more about control. You sometimes don't know where you are. So then you try and stop everything in order to control again. So movement has a lot to do with control, I suppose.
Well, that opens a whole new subject that we covered before, but in terms of control and controlling and controlling on just your physical, managing energy. So, I'm constantly kind of highlighting the aspect of you that wants to control, change, fix, and manipulate the hologram, that wants to be in control, that wants to have a sense of control of the body and discipline and all that sort of thing. And all of that is not you as consciousness, because when you are operating as consciousness, there's no need to control, because everything is reorganizing in your favor. Everything is not even under control, but everything is just, it's all in alignment, and it's all unfolding naturally.
Well, I think what we feel is the great caring, and maybe that's the wrong word. So, and I suppose we could call it love, or we could call it grace, or we could call it many things that consciousness has for us as we show up as ourselves, right? And that we are both. Consciousness understands that. Human tends to forget it, which is what this is all about. And it's so how many times has something shown up and you just never noticed it, but finally it clicks? So it's like ourselves as consciousness looking for a way for us to get it. That part of us that's the processor. And being kind, and sometimes it takes a slap. I had a client once, and she came for, she had vertigo from a plane crash, or it was a car crash, I guess that's what it was. And then in talking with her, she had had 14 car accidents. Now, you and me at that point, I think about the second one, we would have really seen what the pattern might have been. And so consciousness is literally tapping on herself to wake her up to something. And we worked on that and found out what a lot of that was. But, consciousness is a very considerate kind, and then it's not. It is when it is, and it is when it's not, because it's not attached. That's the key, I think, that people get hooked up on. It holds for all, so there you go.
Right, and I invite all of you to identify as consciousness. So when you start to shift your perception to your perspective that you are consciousness navigating in form, it's a really different experience. It's when you're thinking that consciousness is something other than you or something outside of you, or even something greater than you, then you're coming from the focus that you're the smaller aspect of body personality. Yeah. Right. And when you shift to that you are consciousness and you have a body personality aspect, it completely changes the way to navigate in this world.
Well, it takes it back to play. We do use that word about consciousness, is that this is a playful state, because there isn't this. Life so often feels like a hard driving intention, right? It's serious. It's take you to your knees kind of thing, and that's just the human perception of that. Consciousness is just like, oh, well, what will I do as this being today, right? In this lifetime. And, so there's great, I want to use the word care, but care, not in the sense of the worry. Care is support. That's part of it. So, grace. How about grace? Oh, good.
Well, being graceful, that's a way of being with motion, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think sometimes we're very clumsy, I suppose. I guess we have to catch ourselves at times, huh? And that's really just being out of alignment with the forces at play, I guess. Dynamics.
Well,
it's all about dynamics.
And what I notice is, like, when you're playing at your house and you get this delightful kind of woo feeling and you start to flop over, it's not clumsy and it's not awkward, and you don't end up falling on the coffee table and hurting yourself kind of thing. There's like a gentle collapse with it, and so there's a natural gracefulness with operating as consciousness.
And sometimes it happens really quick, so you miss the grace in it.
Yeah.
When people shift, they can shift pretty quickly, and that's part of how they've encoded the information, and sometimes people need to be, or they don't need to be, they feel they need to be. So it's their setup and how they've organized their sense of reality, whether that's a gentle experience or whether that's a hard experience, right? And so that's also what people are probably experience a lot of. It seems very people are feeling, and they may be feeling it as forced to do something when it's really their own mechanism that's moving them. And so there's another thing. When movement comes from within and when movement comes from outside of us. And as consciousness, we're both. We're all of it. So it's just the level of awareness we're holding at. So it's either inspiring us, which is from an inward space, or it's motivating us from an outside. And the motivation gets us geared to inspire us to do something. and all of that. How much is self-generated? I think you mentioned that earlier, where we all are in this. So there's lots of stuff out there to be aware of if you want to be. And it just is reminding us of this time and space in a nonlinear time-space continuum. Because there is no time or space.
There is no time or space as consciousness, but in radio time, podcast time, there is time and space. Yeah. So we need to, do I have my time right? I'm going to do it anyway.
You're pretty close. Yeah.
I'm pretty close. Somewhere in the world, some universe, it is almost time. And so I'm feeling motivated. We are going to take a commercial break. No, it's exactly 11:45. We have to take a commercial break, but stay tuned. We're talking about consciousness and movement from a state of grace. We'll be right back.
Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs. Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath, accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations. I'm Joan, and I'm here with Janet, and we are talking about consciousness and movement.
You know, that's one thing we were talking about at the break there, is how we use our different senses to track movement. And one thing is through sound. And, you know, that inner ear and all that little villi that move like crazy is it resonates frequencies and vibrations and stuff, keeps us upright. And that you're going to experience movement. You can, the unseen, because we don't see the sound. We hear the sound, but we see the sound through hearing. And we can tell something's there. And we're getting, that's one reason we tend to turn this TV off or the radio off or whatever it might be, because we're feeling that. We feel that vibration. We feel that movement. And it gets kind of repetitive and can be quite annoying. So, well, I like the quiet now. That's nice.
You know, I was thinking about this morning because I used to live on Vashon Island, which is an island of, back then it had, 10,600 people was at the last census 10 years ago. And so it's naturally a very quiet, rural experience. And it's also energetically quiet due to the lack of people. And I had to, in a sense, desensitize myself to a degree to be able to move to Tacoma, which is kind of a small town in the scheme of things. And I had been noticing how the noise was irritating me, and it wasn't always because it was physically noisy, but the vibratory level of human beings packed in one area was very noisy. So I am working with different ways to not be bothered by that, or to be in a different space for that. Because, hey, I grew up in huge cities. I didn't move to Vashon until I was 25. I lived in Washington, D.C. and London and New Delhi, India, for God's sake. So, there's something about noise and vibration and stillness and quiet, and that you can actually exist in a sense of, or in a space of stillness and quiet, even if you're standing in the middle of a shopping mall at Christmas time.
Well, I think that's one thing that's happening for people is that they start to respond because they're irritated. And the irritation is a movement, right? It's like the itch. You get an itch, and how do you do that in an internal place that's not physical? It's not anchored in that. It's an energetic itch. And people are unaware of how itchy they are. And
there's got to be a cream for that, I tell you.
Yeah, it's called heart-centered awareness. That's the only cream I know that gets down to that level. And so we're having these experiences. We don't even understand what the agitation is. But I think in a conscious level, certainly in the political field in the United States these days, everybody's getting itchy. And that's part of what we're sensing when we're thinking about what the show might be about, was what are we noticing? And it was how much stuff is kind of all over the place, and there's that irritation.
Right.
So if it's a constant hitting the same exact place, that becomes an irritant. Usually.
Well, what I would say is I agree with you, and that we're tuning into the more subtle energy levels, and that something is getting ready to blow. And it's all very exciting from the perspective of consciousness. So I invite you guys to stay tuned and keep listening to us, because we'll still be here on the air even if everywhere else is nuked.
You're that, Cameron.
ride the wave with us. And I want to invite you to go deeper with us and connect with us beyond this show. So you're listening to us on the podcast or live or whatever, and it's really great. But if you want to engage with us beyond this show and in different ways, you can go to our website, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. You can listen to all our podcasts are there. You can also listen to my YouTube videos. I post them there every week on different ways to navigate life as consciousness. You can also read our blogs. Janet writes a fabulous blog on Mondays, and I do them on Fridays, so there's constant information that way. You can also, I invite you to attend our meetups. We have meetups in Portland and in Seattle, Bellevue, Tacoma, and University Place. Janet and I also do energy sessions, so you can find out more about our sessions there. There are links to Facebook on that site as well. And there's also links to Twitter, and you can subscribe to us on YouTube that way. And coming up this weekend, I am at the Boeing Expo. That's Saturday, July the 22nd from 10 to 4 at the Kent Commons. You can find out about my other meetups on our meetup page. And Janet, real quick, tell them about our Conscious Conference call tomorrow.
Oh, that'll be Thursday night at 7 p.m. Pacific. It's an hour, and it's a chance to let's see what's itching at you, and we'll be with heart with that and see what bliss can come from being present with us. So yeah, it's a great experience, and that's Conscious with Joan and Janet at Gmail as the contact information.
And you can also find that at our website, Conscious Conversations with JoanandJanet.com. If you've only written one thing down or memorized one thing here, that's our kind of clearinghouse for all this kind of stuff. Right. But the one thing that may not be on our show, on our show's website, but mine is my coaching program, 12 Weeks of Transformation. So you can go to joan-newcomb.com find out about that if you are feeling motivated to completely transform your life and you'd like me to hold the space for you to do that.
You know, you mentioned a good point, Joan, the difference between when you're surrounded by a lot of humanity in your immediate neighborhood or something as opposed to, out in the middle of the woods. And that's pretty much why people go to the middle of the woods, is they're looking to get away from other people and they want quiet. And then they go to the lake and everybody else is there too. So, you know, it might be more time to spend at home. It's kind of hard to say, but we are resonating. We are registering what's going on around us, whether we're aware of it or not.
And but we're not always registering the time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
we're not what?
We're not always registering the time. So we invite you to notice what it's noticing and enjoy this. And I really appreciate you listening to this regardless of the time or space that you're here. That you've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and I'm your host, Joan Newcomb.
And I'm Janet Barrett. And thank you so much for being with us.
Tune in next week, same time, same channels.
You've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And thanks so much for helping to co-create the show, no matter if you're listening live or on demand. You energetically contribute to our collective experience. Joan and Janet love to hear from you and invite you to email your comments and ideas for them to explore each week. Contact them at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Tune in next week for another great show, and until then, keep enjoying this wonderful adventure we call life.